So thank you so much for joining me today on the Teachers Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. You're very welcome. So we are actually at the Brilliant Boys event arranged by Lucas Training. So thank you so much for giving up your time, because I know that you're going to be doing a workshop later. So we're going to be talking about Alfresco Learning, which is the name of your company, but I loved that name.
Oh, thank you.
I love alfresco eating. But I just thought, no, it was great. Just, get outside. So what I ask everyone to do first is give me a backstory. So obviously there's two of you. It's the first time I've done two together. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how that goes and who fights to answer the questions. But do you want to give me a backstory of how you got into teaching and where you are now?
Do you want to go first? Yeah. So I basically always wanted to be a teacher. I did a primary education degree for 3 years and then went straight into teaching from there. It was what I always wanted to do. It was just everything that I wanted. And then when I got my classroom, and I remember being in NQT just thinking, wow, I can't believe I've actually made it here, have my own class.
Yeah, for me it was a little different. I kind of got into teaching accidentally. I sort of left college, didn't really know what I wanted to do, went into chemistry and did a chemistry degree, met someone who actually became a chemistry teacher, and because she was going into schools, I was like, oh, I might go into schools, but not to do chemistry, so I'll go into primary schools and see how it is. Went into some primary schools, was thinking, actually, I really love this environment. I love working with the children. Mm-hmm. I love how every day is different, and so from that, when I left my chemistry degree and finished the degree, I became a TA and then took up a PGCE and carried on from there into primary teaching, really.
Fantastic. And so how did you meet each other then?
We worked at the same school. So I was actually taking a break from teaching for a year and working as a learning mentor, and I came to the school that Jenny was already at. So we worked for a year, sort of me floating in and out of Jenny's classroom, supporting children in that way, and then I stepped back into teaching the following year, and we were both in Key Stage 1.
Yeah, so you were in year 1 and I was in year 2, and so we sort of connected that way. Our team was a very close team, so we got to know each other through that, and then realised quite quickly that we were very similar in our styles of teaching and our beliefs around teaching, really. So that's sort of how we met.
Yeah, we both took quite a lead role, didn't we, in the Key Stage. It was a large school, 3-form entry, so I kind of took a leading role in year 1 and Jenny kind of took a leading role in year 2. But yeah, we loved our time teaching together, didn't we?
Yeah.
So obviously you built a relationship, but you also built a love of something else. What was that?
So outdoor learning. So basically the outdoors was always, when I started becoming a teacher and I was an NQT, it wasn't something that I immediately did. It wasn't something that I did straight away. It was only after we'd had some staff training and someone from an outdoor learning company had come in, and that's when I was like, actually, we've had a 2-hour twilight and I feel refreshed after that, because we've been outdoors the whole time compared to being inside on 2-hour training and you just feel dead. So from that I was like, this is how learning should be. If I feel so happy learning this way and I've taken so much in from this training, then maybe I should do that a little bit more in class. And then I'd started doing little bits here and there, but it was only in my last year of teaching really that I truly developed like a belief in the whole outdoor learning, taking learning outside for a lot of year lessons, different curriculum ideas, things like that. Due to the class that I had. So the class that I had was a very challenging class. It was the class that nobody else, wants. Everyone in the school knows them on first term basis for, the wrong reasons. It was
difficult year for you, wasn't it?
A difficult year. And so I started taking them outdoors with other staff, with me, as a way of sort of having a little break from the classroom, having a little break from the noise, having a little break, giving them a break, giving me a break, giving the other staff a break. And it sort of started like that. And it was when I saw how their behaviour changed outside, that's when I realised actually the outside is what this class needs. And all of a sudden the children that inside the classroom would be bouncing off the walls quite literally, would actually go outside, really take close observation without even being prompted, take close observation, lead other children and show them things, be inquisitive, be curious, be talking about it, be a lot calmer. And then from then on, I sort of never looked back with that class. I just took them out as much as possible. I think, you know, you had a similar sort of experience.
Yeah, so being in year one, my big concern was those sort of typical boys that come into year one who are only just 5 and they're not ready to sit at tables, they're not ready to hold a pencil, they're just really not ready for that formal learning style. And I was very passionate about play-based learning for a long time. So the outdoor learning was kind of a natural progression from that. I was given a group of children from across the 3 classes who were particularly low in phonics. They weren't on track for passing the screening check, and kind of was told, you know, do your best with them, get them as far as you can. And I looked at them and thought, it's not working, this style of learning, it's just not working for you. You need something different. And that's when I started taking them outdoors and doing very physical activities, you know, chalk right across the school walls and writing in mud and things like that. And suddenly the diagraphs started to stick and the blending started to come along and we started to see progress. And that was a 20-minute sort of lesson each day. And I progressed from there, basically, went from doing phonics with that group to then with my own class, then taking little activities outside and basically expanding it into full lessons.
Wow, thank you. I actually just wrote a little note here. Did you find yourself thinking, how do I take every lesson outside? Like, when you were planning, did you think, can I do this outside?
I think there's, you know, occasional times it takes a little bit more to think about in terms of, oh, how could I take this outside? I really want to do something outside, but what could I do? But I think for me, it always came quite naturally. I'm quite a creative person anyway. And so I think, you know, for me, the ideas sort of seem to come a little bit more naturally. And I think because, you know, you look on so many things on social media and you see so many things, and those outdoor things always stuck with me. And I think that's where I sort of drew my inspiration from initially, and then sort of felt a bit more confident to develop my own ideas outside and took it outside that way. I don't know if you
I think it's just something that you build over time. You know, like I was saying with the phonics, we were only short sessions that we started outside, and then as you get used to being outdoors and using the resources that you've got out there, then the new ideas start to come to you and you start thinking, oh, I'll try a little bit of this and we'll try a little bit of that. And before you know it, you've kind of got this whole repertoire of activities and ideas that you can use.
And I guess some of, you know, just like, you know, if you had a worksheet or an activity sort of indoors, you can kind of put different learning in the same kind of activity, I guess.
Yeah.
So how often did you go outside?
Oh, it depended on the week. So it depended on what we had planned, and it also was weather dependent as well. So we still went outside all weathers, but if it was a particularly wet week, we wouldn't be making them be outside every day, would we?
Yeah, especially when they weren't always appropriately clothed.
Yes.
So that's, I think, you know, the biggest thing that sort of decided whether we'd go out or not. For us, it sort of tended to be the drier days, but that's because the children came to school dressed for that, you know, those days.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, like you said, depends on the lessons that we're doing. Sometimes we'd have a maths week where every single maths lesson was outside, and then we'd have another week where we just used natural resources, but we did it inside. So it sort of depends on what we were doing, you know, what the weather was doing, but also what we were trying to cover as well, I think.
So you didn't force it?
No, exactly. Yeah, we didn't force it, but did it enough that the kids, you know, were still engaged and knew that we would do it, but didn't do it all the time. Just because I think as well, like being outside all the time, if you're in a school, is quite challenging in a way. You know, it's quite takes a lot more energy to be outside, and even though, you know, the benefits are amazing and you see all the benefits, I don't think I could do it every single day. I don't think I could do it every single lesson every single day. But I think it was lovely to take them out as much as we could.
Yeah, and it's refreshing then. And I think that if you do it regularly, the children get into those routines of what's expected of going outside, and that's great then, because if you do have a week where there's some reason, whether it's the weather or whether it's clothing or whatever your reason is that you can't go outside, the children still know what's expected the next time that you do go out.
Yeah. Okay. So how did the leadership react then to you taking the children outside all the time?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it started with I want to take them out, so I'll just do it anyway. And I think because we were always very curriculum focused, well, I especially was being in year 2, very conscious of, what they needed to know by the end of the year, not what they needed to know for the SATs. It was always very much a curriculum focus. So we'd go outside, but there would always be an objective covered with that. And I think because we approached it in that way, it was actually taken on board, a lot better by, SLT in our school, because actually it was extending their learning and developing and deepening their learning rather than doing something completely different. So I think because we approached it in that way, it was always quite accepted.
Yeah, we were quite lucky really in that we had floor books as well. So if we went and did a lesson outside, if there wasn't evidence specifically in their own individual books, we had a class floor book, so we could photograph it, take down post-it notes and stick all of the evidence into there afterwards. So we were quite lucky in that way.
If you needed to, okay. And so what about preparation then? How long does it take, and what resources do you need?
I think you can just go outside. You've got everything that you need out there. You've got the space. Some schools, obviously, you've got different settings. So some schools might have a garden area and they might have trees, which will then bring them sticks and leaves and things like that, which are really great for using as loose parts for your maths or any kind of activities. Other schools, you might need to do a little bit of preparation in collecting those natural resources, but we say get the children involved and task them with it. You've got enough to do with all your planning and everything. Ask the children to go out and collect some sticks at the weekend and have a box that you keep them in, or, a storage space outside to keep them in, leaves, pine cones, all of those things.
Yeah, I always think that one thing that I always kept in my cupboard, which helped me just go outside, even on the spur of a moment, would be chalk. Because everyone's got a playground, and okay, it might not be massive, but every school has a bit of tarmac. So if you have chalk in your cupboard, if you just feel the moment take you, and you actually think children could do these part whole models outside, they can draw it in chalk and they can go and do it, then you've got it there. You can go straight away, and that's something that, regardless of whatever you're teaching, chalk will get you a long way. You can do so much things with chalk.
What I like about what you're saying is you're not really talking about anything that requires a lot of preparation outside. And I think, when I think back to, I was only in primary for a few years, I think, I feel like I'd need to chalk out the playground before they go outside. And how would I do that? Because there'd be break time and they'd, mess it all up. And, but I guess really you don't have to do that, and if you can think of some kind of activity for them to do first while you do something like that needed, then
you can get the children involved as well and get them involved doing it. And the things like you mentioned about having it on the playground, the great thing is you can leave it on the playground after you're done. Lunch and break time, they'll go back and some of them will revisit that learning, and it's another opportunity for them to practice those skills. I was just thinking as well in terms of preparation for clothing, we used to sort of build up a bank of spare clothing for those children that might come in and they've not got a coat and it's quite a cold day. So we sort of would ask for donations of clothes that had been, grown out of to keep. Our school, and I'm sure other schools were the same, had loads of lost property left at the end of every term. It would always go out on tables to be claimed, but there would always be a stack of coats left or jumpers,
and wellies.
Gloves. Yeah, we used to find pairs of wellies, didn't we? And we'd just basically take them into our own personal cupboards and just put them in a box. And then if a child was like, I have not got gloves today, or I've not got wellies, and it was a wet day, we'd just pull them out of the cupboard and you've got something ready then.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. I mean, my daughter's just started school, she's in nursery, but it's like they do go outside a lot, so they have to have a full-on rain suit, they have to have a hat, they have to have gloves, because they're just always going outside like that. But she still comes back mucky. And wellies. She's got to have wellies at school as well. They have to leave there. Okay, so what are the benefits of children learning outside?
Oh, so many benefits.
I mean, one thing I think is a real big one that I always think about is actually them being able to feel a little bit more free outside. It does feel a little bit like freedom for them, and that sort of brings them out in a whole different way. The behaviour is something that you know, you always hear is holding people back a little bit. They're thinking, oh, I've got that class that, you know, is very challenging, and I've got that class, like there's no way they can go outside, because actually like inside the classroom they just, you know, fight and everything like that. But actually I had that class, and taking them outside really changed the way that they acted. And some of my best lessons with that class were outside, because it was just such a freeing environment. They could just move. There were so many different things they could look at. There was just so much for them to kind of take in and absorb, that it sort of like fell into place a little bit more, and they're a bit more, you know, comfortable and comfortable to learn and engaged to learn. And it just, gave them that sort of freedom, and it was just great to see them all the time, every time like that.
Yeah, and that being able to experience things firsthand. So, you know, rather than watching videos of things or just talking about things and describing it to them, getting them outside and experiencing it. So, you know, if you're teaching the seasons, it's so often done where you paint 4 trees and then you put different coloured leaves for the different seasons, and you draw the snow on the winter one. Actually break those kind of lessons down and teach them throughout the year. Go outside and experience winter and experience autumn and see what you can find, watch the changes in your environment. That kind of learning, it just offers so much depth and understanding, and it feeds into everything else, because then if they've got, say, an understanding of seasons, they can then use that in their creative writing, and they can use that then when you're talking about animals later on in your science. They can understand, you know, the curriculum so much better, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely puts things a little bit more into context for them, and you know, it really does develop those like problem solving, reasoning skills outside, because there is so many ways you can, you know, approach a problem outside. It's not a fixed way that you're expecting one way in the classroom. It is, you know, can be done in so many different ways, and there's always like opportunity for lots of group work and teamwork. And you know, when you do look for mini beasts, or when you are looking at plants, it brings in that sort of connection with nature and that sort of nurture. They nurture the mini beasts that they find and the plants that they find, and you know, that caring for each other that sometimes is lost a little bit when you're inside the classroom, because they don't need to behave like that.
And it caters to all of those soft skills. You know, our curriculum is very focused on knowledge, and it can be really difficult to work the skills into your lessons in class. And when you're outside, there's all the communication, there's the social skills, you know, there's the emotional responses to what you're doing. And all of the time, whilst you're teaching something else, the children are developing those skills, you know, their motor skills, things like their core strength, so they can sit up properly at a table. All of those kinds of things are, that it's done for you whilst you're teaching something else outside, and that's the fabulous thing about it. And there's also research as well into sort of the effects of nature on the brain and the prefrontal cortex in the brain. Actually, the waves change in your brain when you interact with nature, in that it kind of slows down, and that part of your brain is responsible for focus and attention. So it refreshes that part of the brain that's really crucial for learning. So even if you go outside just for 10 minutes, when you bring your class in, you're going to feel refreshed.
I think absolutely. Even at Classroom Secrets, you know, we've had meetings before and we're like, do you know what, let's go for a walk. And we go out for a walk, and it really does help you to think, especially if you're trying to think of big ideas. But I think for me as well, the experiential learning is a key thing. And I think a lot of schools now focus on even just like lots of little trips that don't cost a lot, because, you know, even to the supermarket, because some children haven't experienced going to the supermarket. So how can they actually write about going to the supermarket? Because it's a lot harder to write about it when you've seen it on the television than actually experiencing it. It just doesn't help me think of the right kind of words, I don't think, does it?
No.
Okay, so obviously, I mean, you've talked about a lot, and I think teachers are going to find it really interesting. And I'm sure there's a lot of teachers listening now thinking, okay, so I'm ready now to try something out. What can you give me some ideas that teachers could use? Just a couple of ideas where it's not going to cost them a lot of money and it's not going to take them a lot of time to try something out in the classroom, and that they're going to get a good result from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll start saying about some Key Stage 2 ideas. So I think science is a really good one to start with because it just so naturally lends itself to the outdoors and the outdoor world. I'm thinking about that friction lesson that's, bringing out that ramp and having every single different material put onto it, and then you put your shoe on and you think how, the friction of those materials, but actually, could you not just take that outside and actually test your shoes? Shoes are designed for the outdoors. They're not designed for the carpets and things. Taking your shoes outside, testing them on the different materials, tarmac, leaves, wet leaves, dry grass, wet grass,
gravel,
all those different materials that are actually already there in the school's doorstep. As well as having, pulleys, forces, those are all big ones in Key Stage 2 that people always think about. Oh, what can I do for that? I was actually the science coordinator in my school as well. That's why I started with science. But having like pulley systems and things, you could just literally buy, all they need is like the pulley system and a couple of ropes, and then you can go outside, start pulling some logs, making a mini beast house, putting it into some context so that they're achieving the learning, but actually having a real life context, taking it outside for really not much money at all. Do you want to say?
It's the memories as well, isn't it?
Exactly.
Making a mini beast house, that's something you remember.
Exactly.
I remember at school making a book, but there's so much I don't remember.
Yeah.
But you remember things like that.
Yeah. So Key Stage 1, a really lovely one is a journey stick. So using that for storytelling. So you made a brilliant one for the Gruffalo, didn't you?
Yeah. So making, the mouse out of the sticks and then basically having him go on a journey and then putting on natural materials onto the stick, just with some string or some elastic band to represent the places that he went in the story. And then that way they can then bring back their stick or bring it back into the classroom, and they have that stick to represent the story, and they can then retell the story from using those natural materials that they've put onto their stick. But also, again, it ties in really well with science and the seasons and, taking a stick outside when it's summer, what can you find? Put on the stick. Taking it outside when it's winter, what can you find? Put it on the stick, or put something to represent it onto that stick, and then those sticks can stay with you in the classroom then, and you can use it to compare the different seasons as well. So there's that, all that needs is basically your sticks and some, string, which really doesn't cost a lot. Using stones, I use pebbles a lot, put some letters on them, numbers on them, words on them. You can use it for so many different things.
Just keep using them?
Yeah, so basically just kept them in the classroom, kept a lot of the stuff in the maths area just because it just fit well there. But when it had words on, had a little separate box of pebbles with lots of words, usually high frequency words or common exception words, something like that. And then basically you can do that to, if they forget how to spell one, go and find it in the box of pebbles and then they use that. Or it could be that you've got a fantastic adjective and you really want them to use a few, amazing ones to up-level the writing. Well, go and pick one from the box, put it somewhere in your sentence, write it down. And again, that really doesn't cost, anything apart from you writing some words on a few stones.
And they're durable.
Exactly.
And they're not laminated, I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I have pebbles that I collected about 4 years ago and I've still got them, and same with conkers. I had some conkers that I've been using for the past 3 years, and they dry.
You are the conker queen.
Yeah.
I have tried this many times. My conkers always go mouldy. I'm not quite sure where I'm going wrong, but you are like the conker queen.
I was just thinking, I've got some conkers in my house and they're definitely shrivelling.
They don't look as good as a fresh conker, but they are still. They're not moulded. If you just give them a wipe, you collect them, give them a wipe, and then basically let them dry, and they will last. They will if they don't get wet and soggy, they'll last.
They don't wipe them. Maybe have it wasn't.
Yeah, when there's bits of mud and moisture and stuff, they don't tend to do well with that.
And then
learning from the outdoor queen.
And then for early years, using the senses is a really good way for developing language and developing that vocabulary. So going into your outdoor area, touching lots of different plants, obviously making them aware of things like nettles and holly bushes that are not going to be as pleasant. But those are really important lessons for children to learn, for them to take that responsibility for their own safety as well.
Like what a nettle is.
Yeah.
How many children now don't know what a nettle actually looks like because schools take them out, or they don't want them around them, or
they don't walk to school.
Or they don't watch school, they don't go outside much, and then something like that, like you were saying.
Or like the cry of disbelief when they've touched a holly leaf because it prickled them. And it's just because they've not experienced it before, and it is really important for them. But something that we do in one of our workshops actually is barefoot walks, so preparing some trays with different natural materials in. So you could have pebbles, you could have leaves, you could have grass, you could have one with just water in, sand, whatever it is, and getting the children to take their shoes and socks off and go for a walk and feel those sensations through their feet, and get them to describe what it is that they're feeling. Is this a comfortable thing to stand on? Is it uncomfortable? Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it tickly? All of those kinds of things. It's just a really lovely way for children to build up that vocabulary.
Yeah.
I love that. I like that idea. But I also like the idea that mess would happen at school. Instead of home. So, do you feel like the children came to expect that you would take them outside?
Yeah, I mean, they would ask for it. They would say, are we going outside for this lesson? And if it was a yes, there'd be a definite little cheer, wouldn't there?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that it had the negative effect either. If I said, no, we're staying inside for this lesson, they'd know that the outdoor lessons were coming.
Yeah.
They were going to get outside soon.
Yeah.
And they definitely knew over time what was expected of them when they went outside. We had boundaries that we'd set up, so getting pieces of coloured ribbon and just tying them to, because our outdoor space was huge, wasn't it? So we'd work in different areas depending on what we're doing. Sometimes you'd want the playground, sometimes we'd want the garden. So getting brightly coloured ribbon and just tying it up around sort of your boundary that you want to create. So like tying a piece to a fence post or a piece to a tree and some to a bush, and just saying to the children, right, that's the boundary we're working in today. Obviously the first few times you go out, there's a lot of explanation there, and this is where it is, and playing some boundary games so they know how far they can go. And then over time, we'd go out, they'd see the ribbon up and they'd go, all right, that's where we are today. And they just know, which is lovely.
And I've heard as well about using ribbon outside. So obviously I've talked about my daughter going to a school that is quite outdoor focused, and I know that if they use ribbon a lot, they actually take it to the woods, and then they have to go find them, and they might all be different colours. And so I guess there are things that you can take outside which are not nature, but you can use it in the outdoors as well.
Definitely.
And something like the ribbon, the sort of like quite wide ribbon, the kind of plasticky one, is great because it's really durable. So if you know that you're going to use a certain space a few times in that week or the next few weeks, providing your site manager's okay with it, you could leave it up, and it's not time consuming.
Okay. So I've had quite a few members of my team want to know more, so I've got some questions for you. So Lindsay wants to know, do you think there's anything that can't be taught outside?
I think there's things that are more weather dependent than others. I think most things can be taken outside. So I'm thinking about technology. You can still take things like tablets outside, but you wouldn't want to do that when it's pouring with rain.
Yeah, and the way you use technology. So you could use iPads and things outside, but you wouldn't necessarily teach children how to log into a laptop by taking their laptop outside. But then once they know how to use the iPad, you can then take that outside to, deepen that learning. So I think it's, there's maybe some things like that where actually teaching it inside so they understand the concept, but then taking it outside to deepen their knowledge, develop their, understanding of it.
And
technology
also making
being
sure
one.
you've got a nice rubber cover on it.
Yes.
Because it's tarmac.
Yeah, exactly.
So Davina says, if there was just one outdoor lesson or activity that every child should do at least once in the school career, what would it be?
Oh, I know what mine would be. It would definitely be to do some mindfulness with them outside, so some kind of like meditation. I also had a class that was quite difficult, and it was quite a loud class. We had a couple of characters who just, really struggled to handle their emotions, and things would get loud, and I would look at the children who are kind of your always children and see that they were struggling with the noise. And I started taking them outside, and we would get togged up in our coats, we'd lay down on the grass and we'd do some cloud watching. And when we came back inside, I remember one of the very quiet children came over to me and just sort of said, "That was fantastic. My head feels so fresh. I feel like I've forgotten everything." And that was kind of the moment that I was like, this is something every child needs to experience. So even if, maybe taking maths and science and English doesn't appeal to you, taking that outside, I would encourage getting outside and doing some mindfulness activities. It's really good for you as a teacher and your well-being, and is really good for the children as well. Only takes 10 minutes.
And I think you've made a really important point. At the end of the day, this is about all children, and we can easily say, oh yes, this is really good for the ones who struggle to sit down. But actually, it's helpful for all children.
Definitely.
And for teachers, as us as teachers as well, because you work hard and you do start to get burnt out, particularly towards the end of a half term. And being outside, it's so good for your well-being too. Experiencing that fresh air and that peacefulness.
Yeah, and I think it really does develop like their, ability to work together and talk to each other. There'll be children that know what you're looking at outside. So if they see a plant or they see a mini beast, they'll know what it is. And there'll be children that have no idea. And actually then going outside, you almost can just sort of take a step back and they will explain to each other what they're noticing. And, they will discuss their observations with each other and sort of challenge each other's thinking a little bit, without you even having to do anything. And so, it does develop every child in that sense, in terms of their understanding of, the real world.
Yeah, I find that interesting that you say, some children will know and some children won't. And I almost wonder if some of those children who don't know do subconsciously know that they don't know something that the other children do. And maybe it's part of feeling like they're experiencing the same thing as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so... Jam says, how can teachers be given the confidence to take the children outside when it seems so much safer to keep them inside?
So I think just starting off small and starting off slow and doing lots of boundary games so that the children know the space that they should be in. So I know when I've gone outside with NQTs, and I've introduced something to the classes, and then I've gone, right, off you go. I've watched NQTs go, and you can see that tension. So getting used to the children moving around so much, and the children getting used to it as well. But also then, when you're going outside, doing a bit of risk assessing verbally with the children. You've obviously got your own risk assessments to do, and we talk a lot about risk-benefit assessments, which you can find on our website, but getting the children to basically decide what the rules should be for outside and why they should be that way. Is it going to be that we just go and we grab everything, and why wouldn't we do that? Why is that a danger? Because if you get the children involved, they will take the responsibility for it. Rather than you saying, don't do this, don't do that, you shouldn't go over there, then you're going to get the children thinking, I'm just going to go try it. You're getting them to think about why. And
I think as well, if you're getting them involved, it's the peer pressure as well. They kind of give each other a little bit of peer pressure to make sure that, we agreed these rules and you are breaking them because I know them so well because I've helped create them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think as well, in my experience as well, it was, if people are in that position where they are alone, they are the only staff member with that class, and that's what makes them a little bit nervous sometimes, that actually, inside the classroom they can maybe just stick their head out the door and get some help, whereas outside you can't really do that because help's a bit further away. If there are children who are a little bit unsure about, for whatever reason, having them go out and do something throughout the day, just with an adult that's free for like 5 minutes in the morning. So I used to have some of my children went litter picking in the garden just for 5 minutes in the daytime, and then they were the children that I knew would get a little bit overwhelmed if they just went out with the rest of the class for the first time. They were the children that I knew just needed to get a little bit used to it before they could do some learning outside. And so after they'd done that a few times, when we took them out as a whole class, I didn't actually need any other adults at that point because they had already experienced it enough to not be so overexcited or overwhelmed, or they'd already experienced it enough to be able to then focus on what they were, there to do, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So Lee says, have you got any thoughts on forest schools or beach schools?
So we, like, our business is more about curriculum-based learning, isn't it, and bringing in the curriculum with outdoor learning. But we still think that forest schools is great, don't we?
Yeah, I think
definitely got its place.
Yeah, exactly. It has its place, and I think, you know, for those that are lucky enough to have the time, the resources, the things to be able to do it, fantastic. But I think as well, you know, don't be put off if you're not in a position, if you know, are unsure of all the outdoor, you know, bushcraft skills, but you want to go outside, don't feel that you can't just take the curriculum outdoors as well. So we have come from the fact that, you know, we're on tight time frames and timetables are tight, and, you know, you want to go outside with your kids, but you have to sort of almost justify it in a way why you're going outside. And so for us, the curriculum was a way to do that. So we still got what, you know, we thought were the benefits of outdoor learning, but the children were also covering the curriculum at the same time.
I think as well, even if you have like, so I think a lot of schools that have a forest school, then they're only going to be doing that maybe one afternoon a week, maybe with a specialist.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean to say that they can't go outside more than those times with their own teachers doing more outdoor learning.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if anything, it's probably having a combination of the two would probably bring even more to that classroom learning, because then the children are going to be outside and they're going to remember all of the things that they were doing in forest school, and I bet some of those skills will then transfer across to what you're doing as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask you some questions that I ask everyone now. So if you could wave a magic wand, how would you solve the life-work balance problem?
I think it all comes down from the top. I think it all comes down from what Ofsted is expecting, and then that sort of comes down from onto head teachers' shoulders, senior leaders, and it works its way down to middle leaders and teachers. So I think if I could wave a magic wand, I would change what Ofsted was looking for. Yeah.
Okay. I think I would change how, you know, the balance of things that need to be done outside the classroom time would be. So for instance, marking being like a big one. So, you know, changing the way you do it so it's purposeful, that you can do quick feedback, and you have seen what all the children have produced in that lesson, but not necessarily being such an onerous task that it takes, you know, hours every night, and that's what you're spending your time doing. Having more time to be able to think, right, how can I make tomorrow just as amazing as today, and actually continue the learning that they've learned today, rather than, right, I'll spend the first 2 hours marking, and then I'll have about half an hour to think about tomorrow, and then I'll have about 10 minutes to make the resources, and then sort of go from there. So I think changing, you know, the expectations of marking, really.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, who was your favourite teacher at school and why?
Oh, mine was my year one teacher. I absolutely loved her. She was called Mrs. Murgatroyd, and your name was either Pet, Poppet or Flower. She was just absolutely wonderful, and the thing I remember about her is the life skills that she taught us. So I remember we all had to learn our full names and our addresses. She had an old pair of like Doc Martens in the corner of the classroom to learn how to tie shoelaces, and there were a few little skills like that, and when you'd learned them all, you'd get to stand up and present it to everybody, and that always stuck with me, even though I was so young. I absolutely loved her as a teacher, and I think, you know, looking back, she cared about more than just the curriculum, and it was about developing these young children, and that really stuck with me as a child.
Yeah, mine was my year 3 teacher, Miss McDonough, and she was just, you know, very nurturing as a teacher, very kind, you know, got the time to know everybody in the class and actually know bits about them, and just memories of her being, you know, very nurturing to the class and actually building a bond, you know, with you as an individual. And one of my favourite memories of her was when we went outside just to read a story on the grass, and one of the boys picked up a ladybird, and she, you know, was a bit scared of ladybirds, and he kind of just ran up to her and was like putting it in her face and was like, here's a ladybird, and she just sort of screamed, but actually took it all, you know, as in her stride, like as a joke, like, you know, played around with the children with it, instead of just being like, put that ladybird away, you know. She sort of kind of let you have a little bit of that freedom and fun times at times when it was necessary, you know, and everyone just needed a laugh.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so where do you think education needs to go in the next 10 years?
I think it definitely needs to keep moving towards skills-based learning. I think when you look at the modern world and the way it is now, You know, technology is only going to keep on advancing, and machines and things like that. And I think, you know, knowledge, it's so outdated learning knowledge, because we've got the internet and we've got Google at our fingertips now, and anything that we need to know, you can just type it into Google. And the thing that people are going to need to thrive is skills. And it's those soft skills as well, things like communication and understanding each other, and, you know, that emotional understanding. I think that's what education needs to move towards, because machines and technology isn't ever going to be able to take over that. That's something that makes us human. And I think that, you know, as things progress, those are the skills that children are going to need.
Yeah, but then as well, like having a way that, you know, every school could go, not outside all the time, because, you know, sometimes it's just not realistic, but actually, you know, every school has an opportunity to go outside. Every child has an opportunity to connect with nature. I mean, one of the things, you know, why we started this business and when we were talking to each other about it is because we believe, you know, fundamentally it's a right that every child should really experience nature and actually get to have that time outside and get that time to enjoy the outdoors. And, you know, if we enjoy it as adults, well, obviously children are going to enjoy it and benefit from it too. So, you know, moving towards skills-based curriculum, but actually having time as well to go outdoors and just do something a little bit off topic sometimes.
Allowing children to be children.
Exactly.
You know, I think
that they need to play.
Exactly.
Yeah, we definitely sometimes forget that. I think particularly in Key Stage 1, when they step up from early years into Key Stage 1, there's so much pressure because the curriculum takes that step up. And I think sometimes we forget that. And
sometimes we forget that they're 6. Like, you know, you're trying to ask them to do all these things, and then, you know, you go to some, you know, meeting somewhere where some adults are a little bit unsure of what the expectation is, and then, you know, you have to remind yourself they are 6 years old. They should be out, you know, playing and doing other things sometimes.
It's when you see them at parents' evening and they're no longer in their uniform and you realise how small they are.
Yeah.
Oh, bless them. I'm just thinking now how odd they look in a school uniform. So last question then, what did you both want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I was always a teacher. I used to be the child that would line up all of the teddies. I'd get a piece of paper, a ruler out, and I would spend hours creating a register and writing all of the names down, and then spend about 2 minutes ticking it all off and start again. I was a really, really sad child.
I wanted to be a zookeeper, was full on into all the animal shows, you know, loved Steve Irwin and everything that he did, wanted to have my own zoo like Steve did, and just all that sort of stuff. Actually researched how to be a zookeeper when I was, you know, in high school. Just always wanted to do something with animals and, you know, that sort of thing, and kind of took a different path really, but you know, now we're back to the outdoors, so it's all right. It's kind of round in the end.
I could still see you doing it one day.
Yeah, maybe in time you'll get, you know, the risk assessments through to get tigers in
zoo school.
A zoo school, yeah.
Who knows?
That's next.
Who knows?
Well, thank you so much for joining me. You've given some great content, and I think there'll be lots more teachers going outside now.
That's great. Thank you for having us.